Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to our first live in our new group. I think it is 6:30. My computer and my phone weirdly give me different times, but let's hope so. So it's lovely to be with you for the first time in a first part of a three-part series this week to introduce me, to introduce the group to you guys, and hopefully to get some conversations started that you will find A, interesting, and B, useful. Otherwise, I'm wasting my time. So, I am Heather Stanford, and I am the owner of Stanford Gould and Stanford Gould Online. I'm the... No, I'm not self-imposed title. I have been given the title by one of my lovely clients of the legal fairy godmother to the wedding industry, and that's what I am hoping we achieve. The idea is that we give you proper advice, sensible advice, commercial advice, understandable advice about what you do and what you need to do contractually. So if you're joining us, I can see people are starting to pop on, which is fabulous. Down in the bottom right hand corner of your screen down there might be a little blue thumbs up. If you just bing that and say hello. I can see Bethan is with us. Hello, Bethan. I can see Margaret is with us. Hello. I can see Claire is watching. Hello. I'm not going to name check everybody as they come on the screen because I could be here all night, because we've got quite a few said they're coming. But if you are here, press the blue button, drop some comments in. I will try and deal with them as the feed goes on or at the end. If I don't manage to do that, don't worry, I will deal with it later on. But the whole purpose of this is to get people chatting and to see who's in the group, and to make sure that you get hopefully the right information from me, hopefully a direction towards the resources that are available, and then you can start to have a chat with one or two people in the group as well, because this is social media. Remember, social media means you chat, and I don't talk at you all the time. Excuse me, all the time, as I choke to death. So this evening we are going to talk about why a client contract is so important. Wednesday we're going to do part 2 and talk about when you might need one, when you might use one. And then on Thursday we're going to talk about how do you get one and where can you go to find the resources that you need to put that into place. Because tonight's episode is going to be very much about the importance of it. And when I say that, I'm conscious that contractual stuff, legal stuff, it's not sexy. It's not fascinating. It's not creative. It's not sparkly. It's quite difficult. It's complex. It can be expensive. And for most of the people that I deal with in the wedding industry, it's that sort of, I've got to do it. Oh, it's going to be painful. I'm going to hate it and I don't understand it. And I just put it off. And even though relatively the expense and time involved in it is probably nowhere near the level of some of the other things that you might do, it's the sort of thing that gets dropped to the bottom of the pile because it's in the too difficult bracket. So my job, our job, Stanford Gould, the legal fairy godmother's job, is to try and make it easy. I'll try, okay? So let's start with basics. We're talking about a client contract, your terms and conditions, your user agreement. You can call it anything you want. It does need to be in writing, okay? So first lesson, Contract Law 101, is that you can have a binding contract which is only verbal, that has nothing written down, but it's incredibly difficult to prove what the terms of that contract are. So when you end up in a fallout with someone, how do you know what you agreed? So my advice number 1 is that a contract that sets out what you are going to do with your client, for your client, and indeed what your client is going to do in response, needs to be in writing. You can call it terms and conditions, you can call it anything you like, but get it written down, and make sure that it sets out the obligations on both sides of this arrangement. It isn't a one-way street. It isn't just all about what you have to do. It's also about what your client has to do. Usually you start and they respond by paying. That's, in really, really broad terms, that's what a contract's about, isn't it? You're providing goods and services and they're paying you for it. In that template, there will be things like what you do, when you do it, to some extent how you do it. But all of those things need to be in there. Now, as I said, this is a two-way street, and it is primarily to protect the parties. Not just you, but your client as well. So some parts of the contract will be very much in your favour, and some parts of the contract are there designed to protect your client. It is therefore in both parties' interest that this document, this contract, exists. And it shouldn't be unfairly weighted in one direction or the other. And if you deal with consumers, which most of you do, there are some limitations around what you can say in terms of a consumer anyway, that you need to be aware of when you're thinking about what needs to go into a contract. But making sure that you're protected and your client is protected is, I think, the key purpose of a contract. That means thinking about the expectations that you might have on someone, when they're going to pay you normally, how they're going to communicate with you, how timely that's going to be, how often it's going to be. That can be a bit of famine and feast, can't it? You can have the client who says nothing, and then the client is on the phone every 35 seconds with something else to ask about. Both are problematic. Hopefully, to some extent, that can be helped with a client contract. It's also about limiting your liability where you can and where you legally can. So complying with the law in your contract is also a key feature. And for most businesses, those key compliance questions are GDPR. Oh God, I'm afraid I'm back to that tedious subject. I talked a lot about this about a year and a half ago. I've been a bit quieter since then, so maybe this is my revised moment. But your contract needs to deal with GDPR and what you do with data, what you do with personal data, and your obligations as either a processor or a controller. That is another live all entirely, but that needs to be in your contract somewhere. Second thing that it probably needs to comply with is your question of insurance and whether you have any, need any. I don't give insurance advice, but I do have great contacts who can. But your contract needs to look at the types of insurance that you have, the levels of cover that you have, and make sure that you are limiting your liability within the confines of your insurance cover, but also within the confines of the law. So you can't just say, I am not responsible for anything ever. It doesn't matter if it goes, excuse the expression, tits up. I'm never going to be responsible for it. That sort of blanket disclaimer isn't going to cut it, particularly if you work with consumers. So having the right restrictions of liability in your contract, absolutely key. And when you're dealing with consumers, it's also important that you make sure that that complies with consumer regulations. So there are certain regulations for consumers to have what are sort of known in the trade as cooling off periods, where if you agree an arrangement with someone, they have a certain time in which to cancel that agreement without incurring any liability. So if you deal with consumers and you have a standard product, a standard package, a standard item that they purchase, usually there needs to be some cooling off periods in which they can decide to change their mind and get their money back. And if that's not in your contract properly, that can be a real problem. That is a whole live on its own. If you deal business to business, that's a bit of a less of an issue. Or if you provide bespoke goods and services to someone, again, a bit less of an issue. But consumer regulations and making sure your contracts comply with those, absolutely key. And I think the final issue that it's important to talk about is how professional you want to look. And the sort of expectations of your clients when they are looking at goods and services for what's probably going to be one of the most expensive days of their lives. If you put aside buying a house and you put aside buying a luxury car, and probably getting married is up there on your most expensive 24 hours ever. Now, none of you individually may be that enormous price, but collectively, most clients are looking at a significant budget for their wedding. And therefore, the expectations of delivery are high. And I think there is an expectation from clients that you, as professional services and goods people, should turn up and look the part. You should be professional. You should look as though you have thought about what you're going to do. You have some contingencies around what you're going to do. You have insurance. You're compliant with things like GDPR and other regulatory requirements. And you've got consumer issues in mind when you think about what that contract needs to contain. Do not be afraid of providing clients with terms and conditions. Some wedding people, creatives, get very, very twitchy about providing paperwork and going, I'm a bit worried what the client's going to say. I think it might put them off. I haven't quite got them yet fixed as a client, and I don't want to give them any paperwork until that happens. I think in this day and age, most clients expect to see something from you, would actually be a little bit surprised if you did not have something in writing that they signed or agreed. And they're expecting to be obligated in some way, once they say yes in principle, to progress that through and to make sure that you rock up on the day to deliver and that they pay you. And all of those things, it's important to have in that contract. Now, I appreciate, as I said at the start of this, that lots of people look at this and go, oh my God, this is just too difficult. This is too complicated. I don't know where to start. I haven't got any budget. I've got something, but it's a bit rubbish. I've had an issue. And thank you, Bethan. I've just seen her note. Oh, bless you. Yeah. You'll learn the hard way. Someone will learn the hard way, and Bethan, bless her, did have a bit of an issue earlier on in the year, which we talked about. You will realise the importance of this, and you'll need to prioritise this at some stage in your business life. To get something in place, to get something that works, to get something that you understand and you can explain to a client, and to make sure that you are running a professional outfit. It is difficult to carve out the time to do it. It is difficult to carve out the money to do it. And when we talk later on in the week, particularly on Thursday, we're going to talk about the how and some of the resources that are available. I'm going to talk you through some very low budget and some slightly less low budget and some expensive options, and I'm going to give you some very realistic explanations about why the price points are where they are and where the resources are that you can have a look. But however you do this, I really can't stress enough how important getting these things right is. When you have a problem with a client, they are your first point of defence. I have in the last month, I think, spoken to about 3 different wedding suppliers who have received letters from clients that they provided goods and services to as part of their wedding, who after the event have rocked up with what I can only describe as a template complaint letter, complaining about the service and asking for some or all of their money back. Now, just as you guys, as wedding suppliers, have groups on Facebook and other social media portals where you all get together and talk about what you do and how you might do it better and how you might work with one another and collaborate and gain knowledge, so do, I'm afraid, brides and grooms and other consumers in the style of Martin's Money Tips and other sorts of Facebook and social media pages. And there are, I'm afraid, groups out there who are advising your customers how best to complain, how best to challenge your contract, how best to press all the worry buttons for you when they get in touch and say, we are not happy and you're not allowed, you're not entitled, this contract is not legal. There are groups which exist that do this. And I've definitely seen an upsurge in clients that I've talked to in the last few weeks who have received those sorts of pieces of correspondence. And it's scary. It's proper scary because these things are very plausible. They are written in a manner to intimidate and scare you. And I have had clients who have just said, oh my God, it's just the path of least resistance. I'm just going to pay them. I'm going to give them some money back. Now, I can't say to you that if you get a contract, you will never have that sort of correspondence from a customer. But at least if you do, you've got some weapons, some armoury, something to attach your argument to. And it's getting progressively more common to see this sort of thing. I think, if I'm going to be really blunt, as brides and grooms sort of tot up what they spent on the day and then think how we might most likely to be able to recover some of that cash from our suppliers. So if you are on the receiving end of that sort of correspondence, if you have previously been on the receiving end of that correspondence or something like it, you've had a complaint, you've had an issue about getting paid, you've had an issue after the event with a complaint, you will know the value of getting this stuff right. I only this morning had a conversation with someone whom I gave them a quote about the price, and they said to me, oh, we can't really afford that at the moment. We've got 30 events next year to do at an average price of £500, let's say, and we can't really afford the terms and conditions at the moment. Now, there are solutions from any budget from 50 quid to 1,500 quid. I would suggest money spent on a product which fixes your contractual position is money well spent, because those guys who are coming to get those goods and services from you are savvy enough to know if you haven't got those terms and conditions in order, if you've not got your house in order, if you're not professional, if it's not, I hate to use the word watertight, but if it's not appropriate and it looks reasonable and it complies with those regulations from consumers, they'll be on it and they will challenge it and they will threaten you and they will frighten you, and you'll be talking to someone like me after the event saying, I wish I'd spent that X amount of money and got it right and I wouldn't have this issue. So the why is all important. Protection, really important for you and your client. Compliance with the law, GDPR, insurance requirements, consumer regulations, and looking the part, walking the walk, talking the talk, sounding like you've rocked up to be a professional in your field, not someone who's playing, not someone who's dabbling, not someone who is on a side hustle, although many of us are, and I don't misunderstand that. Lots of people do this as an addition to their main job. But even if that's you, turn up and look the part, look professional, give them that value for money. Keep providing those fantastic goods and services and products that you amazing creative people, I don't know where you think it up from, but my goodness me, there's some people who just get the most amazing products and services. You get great reviews. You have something that customers want. Make sure that you rock up and look professional about it with the right contractual structure and the right documentation for them. So later on in the week, so not tomorrow, but Wednesday evening, we're going to be talking about the when you might need a contract. And that's going to be in two parts. It's going to be when in your business journey do you suddenly think, I might need some terms and conditions. And secondly, it's when in the customer journey do you produce them. So I'm afraid that's going to be a little bit contract law ABC. Contract law for dummies, maybe. That's what we'll have on Wednesday, a bit of that. and we'll talk about when you need to take the plunge and jump in with a contract. And then on Thursday, as I say, we're going to talk about how do you do that, and there'll be some resources. So I hope you'll join me later on in the week. Wednesday is when, Thursday is how. They are both at 6:30. Back on a Facebook Live. If you're watching this on the catch-up later, because I appreciate not everybody can stay with it, please tell us you were here. Blue thumbs up in the bottom corner. Comments or questions, pop them into the feed. I will try to answer them whilst cooking my family dinner in about 20 minutes or so. But just drop the questions in. If you've got helpful tips, helpful observations for other people, perhaps you've been through a situation where you have a really good piece of advice about how you dealt with that, then pop it on the feed. Let's have a chat about it. Let's share it. If you've got questions about what you've got and whether or not it's legal. Oh God, I get asked that question all the time. Is it legal? I don't know. We'll have a look at it for you though. If you've got questions about that, then jump on, pop in the feed, or you can DM us directly if it's a question that you do not want the entire world to see. This is a closed group and only people who are in the group can see the discussion in the group, but nonetheless you might not necessarily want every florist this side of Chesterfield to know about what you're doing, or every planner this side of Tamworth to hear about your contractual issues. If that's the case, drop us a DM, drop us an email. There's plenty of ways to communicate with us, and we will try and help you. That's what we are here to do. Legal Fairy Godmother is trying to help. We're trying to make the complex stuff simple, the balls-achingly tedious stuff more manageable, and give you a solution that means you can tick that box and crack on and do the stuff that you love. That's what we're here to do. So, lovely to chat. I hope that's been helpful. Few insights into the why. Wednesday's the when. Thursday's the how. Take care. See you Wednesday. Bye.